Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I cream, contour, and highlight, so if you want to see how I went from the left to the right, then just keep watching. Of course, I'm going to begin by priming my skin, and I'm going to use MAC Fix Plus, and then for foundation I'm going to use my NARS All Day Luminous Foundation. I'm applying my foundation with a regular foundation brush, but I'm going to use my beauty blender to blend it all out. So before I get started highlighting and contouring, I just wanted to quickly mention what exactly that means. So highlighting is bringing certain parts of your face forward, bringing attention to them, highlighting them, drawing attention to them. And then contouring is creating shadows in other parts of your face. So that's usually under the cheekbones, around the forehead, the jawline, the nose. That's just creating shadows and creating a structure and a shape that might have been taken away when you did your foundation, or just something that you're not happy with. So you can change those things with highlighting and contouring. So just keep in mind that this video is how I like to highlight and contour. Everybody does it differently, everybody has a different face shape, everybody has different preferences. So it's really just up to you when you figure out what you want to highlight and what you want to contour. These are just some general tips on why we're doing what we're doing. For concealer, I'm using Maybelline Fit Me. I like this concealer because it gives you a good enough coverage, but it's also bright enough to use as a highlight. So I don't do this motion, the circle motion, because I think that draws attention to the bags under your eyes. So I do this triangle motion really close to my nose, and this is kind of mimicking how the light would hit you from above. So that's how I like to highlight underneath my eyes. To contour, I'm going to use this kit by Mercier, and I'm going to take this darkest color. So to carve out my cheekbones, I usually just go from the top of my ear to the corner of my mouth, and then I can usually feel that hollow right along there, and I just trace along that with the cream contour. One thing I like to do is go a little bit higher than the actual hollow, just because when I blend it out it is going to move around a little bit, so I go a little bit higher and it'll end up where I want it. The next step is to contour my nose, and I'm just going to draw 2 straight lines just to add some definition. And then I'm also going to highlight around my hairline and my forehead, and this is really going to help to give the appearance of a smaller forehead. So as you can see, the contour shade that I'm using isn't much darker than my skin tone, and it's also a very cool color. It's not like very orange or warm. You want something that's a little bit ashy looking and not too much darker than your skin tone to mimic shadows on your face. Next, I'm going to go in with my beauty blender and blend out all of the concealed and highlighted areas first. This is just what works out best for me. I like to do the lighter parts first and then the darker parts afterwards. And when I'm blending out my concealer, I'm just doing a lot of tapping. You don't really want to rub, because then you're going to, first of all, you're going to remove a lot of the concealer off of your face, and then you're also going to remove the foundation from underneath. So you just want to pat it out, take your time, and if it's too bright, you could always flip it around and use the foundation side, and that should help it blend in a little bit. I usually do that like on the edges. Now, because I highlight the entire center of my face this way, I know it looks a little bright at first, but that's just because we haven't blended out the darker parts yet. Once we blend out the darker parts and set everything down, it's going to look normal, I promise. I'm using my finger to blend out my nose contour. On one side, I'm going to show you how I use a stippling brush. This one's from e.l.f. to blend out my contour. Now, my biggest tip is that when you're blending out your contour on your cheekbones is to blend upward. Like I said, no matter what direction you blend in, I feel like when you're blending it out, it's always going to transfer down your face because of the circles that you're making. So I blend in little circles and I try to move upwards. On the other side, I'm using my beauty blender to blend out my contour, just to show that, you know, you can use a brush, you can use a beauty blender, you can really use whatever you have on hand. Now I know this is a cream highlight and contour tutorial, but I find that everything works better when I set it with a powder. So I'm going to use my Kat Von D Shade and Light contour palette as usual, and I'm going to just lightly pat on top of where we contoured and then just buff it out without rubbing too much, because you don't want to move the product around your face. When I highlight and contour this way, when it's so full face, I like to make sure that it's not going to move all day. So I like to use the baking method, which is just packing on a loose powder onto your highlighted areas to make sure that you don't get creasing, to make sure that it doesn't fade away. It'll really just lock it in place. And you can also use this to clean up your contour. To prevent under eye creasing, I like to first make sure that I pat out the concealer under my eyes really quickly, just to make sure that there are no creases there, because if you're already having creasing and you put the powder on top, it's really just going to lock in those creases and it's going to be that much harder to hide them. So I just quickly pat out underneath my eyes and then I go in with the powder on my beauty blender. Then I take some powder on my beauty blender and I go just beneath my contour line just to clean it up and really just sharpen up that edge and make sure that it's not too low on the cheek. This is really going to sculpt out your cheekbones. And the longer you let that powder sit, the better it's going to lock it into place. So while this sits, I'll just move on to do my lips. And then I'll come back and take a really soft brush. This one is a small tapered brush from e.l.f. and I'm just going to brush away that powder. One tip I would have, especially if you're my skin color or darker, is that you want to use a really light hand when you're brushing away this powder, because if you're using such a light powder and you go on with a heavy hand, you're going to really push it into the skin and it could change the color of, you know, your foundation or whatever underneath. So you really want to lightly brush it away so that it all comes off your face, so that you're not pushing any of it into your skin. And I'm going to take a powder brush and just blend everything out just so that it's not too harsh. So I was going to take this part out or speed it up even more, but I decided to leave it in because the most important thing with all this when you have so much on your face is really just to take your time to blend it all out. It's really going to make a huge difference in the end. You're going to see that it's going to just look much better when you can't see where one product ends and the other begins. So just take your time to blend everything out. To finish off the look, I'm going to use this blush. I'm pretty sure this is Red Vino by Milani. And then, of course, a highlighter. I'm going to use Laura Geller's Gilded Honey. And then instead of just on the very top of my cheekbones, I kind of drag my highlight down a little bit just to blend it in with the blush and everything. And then the bridge of my nose and my forehead with whatever's left on the brush. I'm going to set everything down with MAC Fix Plus just to make sure it's set all day. all done. So please give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful and if you enjoyed. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!